The scent of sagebrush and dust filled Samuel O'Reilly's lungs as he stood on the ridge overlooking his ranch, watching the horizon bleed crimson and gold, when he spotted her standing on his property without permission, her easel catching the last rays of daylight. He froze mid-step, his weathered hand instinctively moving toward the rifle slung across his back before he recognized the figure as a woman. In Socorro, New Mexico Territory, in the year 1882, strangers on your land meant trouble more often than not. But this stranger seemed absorbed in something other than cattle rustling or claim jumping. She stood perfectly still except for the movement of her arm as she swept a brush across canvas. Samuel was 32 years old and had been running the Double S Ranch for nearly 8 years since his father passed from pneumonia. He was a man of few words, preferring the company of horses and cattle to people. The townspeople called him the Quiet Rancher, and he never disputed the title. His dark hair hung past his collar, and his sun-bronzed face bore the lines of a man who spent every daylight hour outdoors. He lived alone in the ranch house his grandfather had built, content with solitude. But now that solitude was interrupted by a trespasser with an easel. He started down the ridge, his boots sending small rocks skittering ahead of him. The woman must have heard him approaching because she turned, her hand flying to her chest in surprise. Even from 20 yards away, Samuel could see her eyes widen. "I am sorry," she called out, her voice carrying on the evening breeze. "I know I am on private property. I just needed to capture this light before it disappeared." Samuel continued his approach, studying her. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with auburn hair pinned up in a practical bun. She wore a simple gray dress covered by a paint-stained apron, and her boots were dusty from walking. Her face was pale in the fading light, but her eyes held a determination that kept her standing her ground despite his imposing approach. "This is my land," Samuel said when he reached her, his voice rough from disuse. He spoke so rarely that his own voice sometimes surprised him. "You should have asked permission. I know, and I truly apologize." She gestured to the canvas. "I am Josephine Sanders. I moved to Socorro 3 weeks ago from Boston. I have been painting the landscape, and I have never seen a sunset quite like this one. The way the light hits those mesas in the distance, and how your ranch sits in the valley below." She paused, seeming to recognize she was rambling. "I should have come to your door first. That was improper of me." Samuel glanced at the canvas and felt something unexpected stir in his chest. She had captured the scene with remarkable skill. The painting showed his ranch bathed in golden light, the mountains behind it rendered in shades of purple and blue, and the vast sky dominated by streaks of orange and red. But it was not just technically proficient. Somehow she had captured a feeling. The loneliness of the landscape, yes, but also its beauty and possibility. "You are good at this," he said, the words coming out more bluntly than he intended. A small smile touched her lips. "Thank you. Painting is why I came west. Boston has beautiful architecture, but the light there is different, softer. Here, everything is so vivid and stark, it takes my breath away." Samuel found himself studying her face rather than the painting. In the dying light, her features seemed almost luminous. She had a small scar above her left eyebrow and paint smudges on her fingers. Her eyes were hazel, shifting between green and brown as the light changed. "How did you get out here?" he asked. "It is a long walk from town. I have a horse. She is tied up near those cottonwoods by the creek." Josephine began cleaning her brushes with a rag. "I should head back before it gets too dark. Again, I apologize for trespassing. I was not thinking clearly. When I see something I want to paint, everything else fades away." "The trails are dangerous at night," Samuel heard himself say. Rattlesnakes come out, and there are coyotes, sometimes worse than coyotes. Josephine met his eyes. I will be careful. Something about the set of her jaw told Samuel she was used to taking care of herself, but the protective instinct he usually reserved for his animals stirred within him. I will ride with you back to town. Wait here while I get my horse. That is not necessary. It is not safe for a woman alone after dark. She studied him for a long moment, and Samuel felt oddly exposed under her gaze, as if she were examining him the same way she had examined the landscape before painting it. Finally, she nodded. Thank you. That is kind of you. Samuel headed back toward the ridge where his horse was grazing. As he walked, he wondered why he had made the offer. He avoided town as much as possible, usually sending his ranch hand Diego to handle business there. But the thought of this woman riding alone in the dark bothered him in a way he could not quite explain. When he returned with his buckskin gelding, Josephine had packed up her supplies into a leather satchel. The canvas she held carefully, the paint still wet. They walked together toward the cottonwoods where a small bay mare waited patiently. She is pretty, Samuel said, nodding toward the mare as Josephine secured her painting supplies to the saddle. Her name is Penny. She belonged to my mother. Josephine's voice softened. My mother passed away 2 years ago, tuberculosis. My father followed 6 months later. His heart just gave out, the doctors said, but I think he died of grief. I am sorry. The words felt inadequate, but they were sincere. Thank you. Josephine mounted her horse with practiced ease. They loved each other very much, 40 years of marriage. My father always said that my mother was the only person who truly understood him. I used to think it was romantic exaggeration, but after watching him fade away without her, I realized he was telling the simple truth. They rode in silence for a while, the horses falling into an easy pace side by side. The sky had deepened to indigo, and the first stars were beginning to appear. Samuel found himself acutely aware of Josephine's presence beside him, the soft creak of her saddle, the way she sat straight-backed and confident. "Why Sakuro?" he finally asked. "My aunt lives here. Aunt Margaret. She runs the boarding house on the main street. After my parents died, I had nothing keeping me in Boston. I wanted to paint the West, and Aunt Margaret offered me a place to stay." Josephine glanced at him. "What about you? Have you always lived here, born in that ranch house?" "My grandfather came out here in '49, following the gold rush, but he was smart enough to realize that land and cattle were more reliable than gold. He built the ranch, my father expanded it, and now it is mine." "It must be lonely," Josephine said softly. Samuel considered this. He had never thought of his life as lonely before, just quiet. But something about the way she said it made him wonder if maybe she was right. "I have Diego, my ranch hand. He has been with us for 15 years, and I go into town when I need supplies. But that is not the same as having someone to talk to, someone who knows you." Her words struck closer to home than Samuel wanted to admit. They were approaching Sakuro now, the lights from windows flickering in the distance. Part of him wanted the ride to last longer, but another part was relieved. This woman saw too much, asked questions that made him uncomfortable. "Where is your aunt's boarding house?" he asked, changing the subject. "Next to the church, the 2-story building with green shutters." They rode through the quiet streets of Sakuro. It was a small town, but it was growing. The arrival of the railroad 2 years earlier had brought new businesses and new people. Samuel preferred it when Sakuro had been nothing more than a handful of adobe buildings and a general store. When they reached the boarding house, Samuel dismounted and helped Josephine down from her horse, his hands briefly touching her waist. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, and he released her quickly. "Thank you for the escort," Josephine said, gathering her supplies. and for not being angry about the trespassing. The painting, Samuel found himself saying. When it is done, I would like to see it. Her face brightened. Really, I would love to show you. I am planning to display my work at the church social next month. Perhaps you could come. Samuel usually avoided social gatherings like he avoided rattlesnakes, but he nodded. Perhaps. Josephine smiled, and Samuel felt something shift inside his chest. "Good night, Mr. O'Reilly." "Samuel," he said. "You can call me Samuel. Then you should call me Josephine or Josie." "My friends call me Josie." He nodded again, not trusting himself to speak further, and mounted his horse. As he rode away, he glanced back once and saw her still standing there, watching him. She raised a hand in farewell, and he touched the brim of his hat in response. The ride back to the ranch felt longer and lonelier than any ride he could remember. Over the next 2 weeks, Samuel found himself thinking about Josephine Sanders more than he cared to admit. He would be mending a fence or breaking a new horse, and suddenly her face would appear in his mind. The way she had spoken about her parents' love, the paint smudges on her fingers, the intensity in her eyes when she looked at the landscape. Diego noticed the change in him. "You have been distracted, patron," the older man said one morning as they worked together to repair the barn door. Diego was 57, with silver streaking his black hair and deep lines around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun. He had been like a second father to Samuel. "Something on your mind?" "Nothing," Samuel muttered. Diego made a sound that might have been a laugh. "In all the years I have known you, I have never seen you ride into town at sunset and come back looking like you have seen a vision. What happened that night?" Samuel drove a nail into the wood with more force than necessary. "I met someone, a woman. She was painting on the ridge." "Ah." Diego nodded knowingly. "What is her name?" "Josephine Sanders. She is new in town, staying with her aunt at the boarding house." "The painter lady," Diego said. "My wife Rosa mentioned her. She came to the mercantile last week and bought supplies. Rosa said she was very polite, very educated." "From back east," Samuel grunted, neither confirming nor denying. "Are you going to see her again?" "She invited me to the church social next month." Diego's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "And you said yes? You have not attended a social gathering in 5 years." "I said maybe." "That is as good as yes coming from you." Diego clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "This is good. You spend too much time alone. A man your age should have a wife, children. I am fine alone." "No man is fine alone, Samuel. Your father, God rest his soul, would want you to be happy. To have a family." Samuel knew Diego was right, but the thought of opening himself up to another person, of being vulnerable, terrified him in a way that facing down stampeding cattle never did. His parents had loved each other deeply, and watching his father's grief after his mother's death had been devastating. The quiet rancher had learned early that silence was safer than speech, distance safer than closeness. But Josephine's words kept echoing in his head. It must be lonely. Maybe it was. 3 days later, Samuel made a decision. He cleaned up, put on his best shirt and his newer pair of pants, and rode into Socorro. It was mid-afternoon and the town was moderately busy. He tied his horse outside the mercantile and stood there for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he walked toward the boarding house. Aunt Margaret answered his knock. She was a stout woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. Samuel had met her a few times over the years at various town functions he could not avoid. "Mr. O'Reilly," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "What can I do for you?" "I am looking for Miss Sanders, Josephine." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Are you now? And what business do you have with my niece?" "I wanted to see how her painting was coming along." "The one she was working on a couple weeks ago." Margaret studied him for a long moment, then smiled. She is out back in the garden working on another painting. Go around the side of the house. You will find her there. Thank you, madam. Samuel followed the path around the house to the back garden. It was a modest space with vegetables growing in neat rows and a few flowers blooming along the fence. Josephine sat on a stool in front of her easel, her attention focused entirely on the canvas. She wore a pale blue dress today, covered again by her paint-stained apron, and her hair fell in loose waves down her back. "Hello, Josephine," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned quickly, and when she saw him, her whole face lit up. "Samuel, what a wonderful surprise. I was not expecting to see you until the social." "I was in town," he said, which was not entirely true but not entirely false either. "Thought I would stop by." "I am so glad you did." She set down her brush and stood. "Look, I finished the painting from that evening. Do you want to see it?" "Yes." She led him into a small shed at the back of the garden that she had apparently converted into a studio. Canvases leaned against the walls, showing various scenes from around Sakura and the surrounding landscape. But the painting she showed him took his breath away. She had refined it since he last saw it, adding details and depth. The ranch house looked warm and inviting in the golden light, smoke rising from the chimney suggesting life and comfort within. The land stretched out in all directions, vast and untamed, but somehow the painting suggested not loneliness but possibility. Freedom, hope. "Do you like it?" Josephine asked, and he heard genuine uncertainty in her voice. "It is beautiful," he said, and meant it. "You made my ranch look like home," she smiled. "That is what I saw when I looked at it, a home, not just a house or a piece of property, but a real home." Samuel turned to look at her. "How did you see that?" "I do not know. I just paint what I feel when I look at something." She touched the canvas gently. "When I saw your ranch in that light, I felt safe. I felt like it was a place where someone could belong." They stood in silence for a moment, and Samuel was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how the small space of the shed seemed to amplify the connection he felt building between them. "I would like to buy it," he said suddenly. "The painting. How much?" Josephine shook her head. "I cannot sell it to you." "Why not?" "Because I want to give it to you, as a thank you for not being angry about my trespass and for escorting me safely home." She lifted the canvas and held it out to him. "Please, I want you to have it." Samuel carefully took the painting, his fingers brushing against hers. "Thank you. I will treasure it. I am painting another one right now if you would like to see." They walked back out to the garden, and Samuel saw that her current work in progress showed the main street of Sakura at dawn. The buildings painted in soft shades of pink and orange as the sun rose behind them. A few early risers walked along the street, and he recognized Diego's wife Rosa heading toward the mercantile. "You capture life," he said. "Not just the places, but the feeling of them. That is the kindest thing anyone has said about my work." Josephine's voice was soft. "Most people back in Boston thought painting was a frivolous hobby for a woman. They expected me to marry to give it up." "Did you have someone?" "Back in Boston. There was a man who courted me for a while. Richard. He was a banker, very successful, very proper. He proposed 6 months after my father died." Josephine sat back down on her stool but did not pick up her brush. "He told me that once we were married, I would not have time for silly pursuits like painting, that I would have a household to run, children to raise. When I said no, he told me I would end up alone, that no man would want a woman more interested in paints than in her proper duties." Anger flickered in Samuel's chest. "He was a fool." "Was he?" Josephine looked up at him, her hazel eyes searching his face. "I am 26 years old, Samuel. By most standards, I am well past the age when I should have married and started a family. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe I will end up alone. Being alone is different from being lonely. Samuel said, surprised by his own words. "I have been alone for years, but I was not lonely until recently." "What changed?" He met her eyes. "I met you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable in a way Samuel had not allowed himself to be in years. Josephine's expression softened, and she stood, taking a step closer to him. "I have been lonely for a long time," she admitted. "Even before my parents died. I always felt like I was looking for something, some place or person that would make me feel complete. When I saw your ranch that evening when I painted it, I felt that longing even more strongly. I cannot explain it, but it was like I was painting a dream I did not know I had." "Josephine," he said, her name feeling right on his tongue. "Yes. Would you like to visit the ranch, properly this time? I could show you around and you could paint whatever you wanted." Her smile was like sunrise. "I would love that." They made plans for the following Sunday. Samuel would pick her up after church services, and they would spend the afternoon at the ranch. As he rode home that evening with the painting carefully wrapped and secured behind his saddle, Samuel felt something he had not felt in years. Anticipation. Hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, his quiet life was about to become something richer. When he got home, he hung the painting above the fireplace in the main room. Diego came in from checking on the evening feeding and stopped short when he saw it. "That is beautiful," the older man said. "Where did it come from?" "Josephine painted it. She gave it to me." Diego looked from the painting to Samuel and back again, a knowing smile spreading across his weathered face. "You saw her today?" "I did. She is coming here on Sunday. Rosa will be very pleased to hear this. She has been worried about you." "There is nothing to worry about. We are just friends." "For now," Diego said. "But that painting, Samuel, that painting was made with love. Whether she knows it yet or not, that woman cares for you. And unless I am blind as well as old, you care for her too." Samuel did not deny it. He stood looking at the painting for a long time after Diego left, seeing his home through Josephine's eyes, wondering if it really could become the haven of warmth and belonging that she had captured on canvas. Sunday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Samuel attended the church service in Socorro, sitting in the back pew as he always did on the rare occasions he came. His eyes found Josephine almost immediately. She sat near the front with her Aunt Margaret, wearing a deep green dress that brought out the color in her eyes. Several times during the service, she glanced back at him and smiled. After the service, the congregation gathered outside to visit. Samuel endured the obligatory small talk, aware of the curious looks from the townspeople. The quiet rancher rarely came to church, and his presence was noteworthy. "Mr. O'Reilly," a voice said, and Samuel turned to find Reverend John Willis extending his hand. "Good to see you here today." "Reverend." Samuel shook the offered hand. "I understand congratulations are in order. Several people have mentioned seeing you in town more frequently. Making connections, building friendships, that is good for the soul." Before Samuel could respond, Josephine appeared at his elbow with her aunt. "Good morning, Samuel. Are you ready for our outing?" "Yes, madam." Aunt Margaret gave him a stern look. "You will have her back before dark, Mr. O'Reilly, and you will behave as a gentleman." "Of course, madam." Josephine rolled her eyes affectionately. "Aunt Margaret, I am 26 years old." "Which is exactly why you should know better than to spend an unchaperoned afternoon with a man you barely know." "I trust him," Josephine said simply, and the words made Samuel stand a little taller. They rode out to the ranch together, Josephine on Penny and Samuel on his buckskin. The ride was pleasant, filled with easy conversation. Josephine pointed out things in the landscape that caught her eye, explaining what she would paint and how. Samuel found himself seeing the familiar terrain through new eyes, appreciating details he had long taken for granted. When they arrived at the ranch, Diego was waiting near the barn. Samuel made introductions, and Diego greeted Josephine with warm courtesy. "My wife Rosa asked me to tell you that she enjoyed meeting you at the mercantile," Diego said. "She wants to invite you to dinner sometime." "I would love that," Josephine replied. "Please tell her thank you." Diego excused himself to continue his work, leaving Samuel and Josephine alone. Samuel showed her around the property, explaining how his grandfather had chosen this particular spot for the house because of the nearby creek and the natural windbreak provided by the rock formations to the north. He showed her the barn, the corrals, the workshop where he did repairs on equipment and saddles. Josephine listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really paying attention. She wanted to know about the horses, about how he managed the cattle in the winter, about what crops he grew in the small, irrigated field near the creek. "You really love this place," she observed as they walked toward the house. "It is all I know, all I have ever wanted." "That is a gift, I think, knowing where you belong." They entered the house, and Josephine's eyes went immediately to her painting above the fireplace. "You hung it there," she said softly. "It is the first thing I see when I come into this room. It reminds me of what you said about home, about belonging." Josephine walked around the main room, taking in the simple but sturdy furniture, the bookshelf filled with volumes on ranching and horse breeding, the few personal items that spoke of 3 generations of O'Reilly men. She paused at a photograph on the mantel showing a young couple on their wedding day. "Your parents?" "Yes, that was taken in 1856, the year they married. They were happy together. You can see it in their faces." Josephine studied the photograph. "Your father looks like you." Everyone said that. Same stubborn jaw, same quiet nature. "And your mother?" She was the talker in the family. She could charm anyone. "My father used to say she talked enough for both of them, so he did not have to." Samuel smiled at the memory. "She died when I was 18. Complications from a fall from her horse. My father was never the same after that." "How did he die?" 5 years later, his heart. "Like your father, I think it was grief that killed him. He just did not want to go on without her." Josephine turned to face him. "That kind of love is rare. Beautiful but also terrifying. To love someone so much that you cannot imagine existing without them." "Is that why you turned down the banker? Because you did not feel that way about him?" "Partly. But also because he wanted me to be someone I am not. He saw my painting as a flaw to be corrected rather than a part of who I am." She took a step closer to Samuel. "I do not want to change who I am for someone else. I want to be with someone who sees me, all of me, and loves me anyway." "I see you," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "And there is nothing about you that needs changing." They stood close together in the quiet house, and Samuel could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that shocked him, but he held back. It was too soon. She barely knew him. But Josephine, brave and direct as always, reached up and touched his face. Her hand was soft against his weathered skin. "I think about you constantly," she whispered. "Since that first evening on the ridge, I have not been able to get you out of my mind. Is that madness?" "If it is, then I am mad too." She smiled, and Samuel could not hold back any longer. He leaned down and kissed her, gently at first, then with increasing passion as she responded. Her arms went around his neck and his hands found her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss was everything he had imagined and more, full of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Josephine rested her forehead against his chest. "I did not come west looking for love," she said, "but I think I found it anyway." "I was not looking either," Samuel admitted. "I thought I was content with my quiet life, but you have shown me what was missing." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, talking and walking the property. Josephine set up her easel near the creek and began a new painting while Samuel sat nearby, ostensibly mending a bridle but mostly just watching her work. He loved the way she became completely absorbed in her painting, the rest of the world fading away as she focused on capturing the play of light on water, the movement of grass in the breeze. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Samuel reluctantly suggested they should head back to town. Josephine agreed, though her expression showed she was as reluctant to leave as he was to see her go. Diego appeared as they were preparing the horses. "Stay for supper," he suggested. "Rosa made extra, and she will be disappointed if Josephine does not get to try her enchiladas." Samuel looked at Josephine. "Would you like to stay? We would still get you back before full dark." "I would love to." Rosa was delighted to have company for dinner. She was a warm, round woman with graying black hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She fussed over Josephine, loading her plate with food and asking questions about Boston and her painting. The four of them ate together at the long table in the ranch house kitchen, and Samuel felt something he had not felt since his parents were alive. Family. Community. The sense that this house was truly a home. As he rode back to Socorro with Josephine that evening, Samuel knew his life had fundamentally changed. He was no longer content with solitude. He wanted this woman beside him, wanted to hear her voice in his house, wanted to watch her paint in the evening light, wanted to build a life with her. But courting took time, and he would do it right. He would not rush her, would not assume that a few kisses and a pleasant afternoon meant she was ready to commit her life to his. Over the next month, Samuel courted Josephine properly. He came to town twice a week to visit her, sometimes taking her on rides through the countryside, sometimes simply sitting in Aunt Margaret's parlor and talking. They attended the church social together, and Samuel endured the knowing looks and whispered comments from the townspeople. Josephine displayed several of her paintings at the social, and they were widely admired. 3 people commissioned work from her, which pleased her greatly. "I can actually make money doing what I love," she told Samuel, her eyes shining. "I never imagined that would be possible." "You are talented. People can see that." They fell into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel continued running his ranch with Diego's help, but now he had something to look forward to beyond the daily work. He thought about Josephine constantly, counted the days between visits, lay awake at night remembering the taste of her kisses. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Aunt Margaret's boarding house watching the stars emerge, Josephine said, "Tell me about your dreams. What do you want from life?" Samuel considered the question. No one had ever asked him that before. "I want the ranch to prosper. I want to breed the best horses in the territory. I want to be like my grandfather, building something that lasts. And personally, what do you want for yourself, not just for the ranch?" He turned to look at her. In the faint light from the windows, her face was beautiful and serious. "I want to share my life with someone. I want children someday. I want to come home at the end of a hard day and have someone there who cares how it went. I want to grow old with someone, like my parents did, like your parents did." "You want those things with me?" The question hung in the air between them. They had been courting for over a month, but neither had spoken explicitly about the future. Samuel knew what he felt, but fear kept him silent. What if she said no? What if she decided the rancher's life was too hard, too isolated? "Yes," he finally said. "I want those things with you if you will have me." Josephine smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I was hoping you would say that." "Because I want those things with you too. I want to wake up in that beautiful ranch house and paint the sunrise. I want to watch you work with the horses. I want to build a life together, Samuel. A real partnership where we support each other's dreams." Relief and joy flooded through him. "Are you sure? Ranch life is hard. It is isolated. You would be far from town, far from your aunt. I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything." She took his hand. "I love you, Samuel O'Reilly. I think I started falling in love with you that first evening when you could have been angry about my trespass, but instead you were kind. And I have fallen deeper in love with you every day since." "I love you too," Samuel said, the words feeling both strange and perfectly natural. "I did not think I could feel this way about anyone. You have changed everything." They kissed there on the porch, and when Aunt Margaret came out to check on them, she found them holding each other and smiling like fools. She tried to look stern but could not quite manage it. "I suppose this means there will be a wedding," she said. "If Josephine will marry me," Samuel replied. "Of course I will marry you," Josephine said, laughing. "Did you think I was going to say no after all that? I should ask properly." Samuel stood and took Josephine's hands in his. "Josephine Sanders, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? I promise to support your painting, to respect your independence, and to love you with everything I have for all the days of my life." "Yes," Josephine said. "Yes, yes, yes." They set the wedding date for mid-October, giving them 6 weeks to prepare. Aunt Margaret threw herself into the planning with enthusiasm. Josephine would wear her mother's wedding dress, which she had brought from Boston. They would marry in the Socorro Church, with Reverend Willis officiating, and hold a small reception at the ranch afterward. Samuel spent the weeks before the wedding preparing the ranch house. He painted the bedroom, bought a new bed and mattress, and made repairs he had been putting off for years. Diego and Rosa helped, clearly delighted that Samuel was finally settling down. "Rosa and I have been married 35 years, Diego said one day as they worked together on fixing up the spare bedroom. "The best 35 years of my life. Marriage is not always easy, but it is worth every bit of effort you put into it." "I want to make Josephine happy," Samuel said. "I want to be a good husband." "You will be. You are a good man, Samuel. Just remember to talk to her. Tell her what you are thinking and feeling. Do not fall into silence the way you do with everyone else. A marriage cannot thrive without communication." Samuel took the advice to heart. He was naturally quiet, but he would make the effort for Josephine. She deserved his words as well as his actions. The night before the wedding, Samuel could not sleep. He stood on the porch of the ranch house, looking out at the land his grandfather had claimed over 30 years ago. Tomorrow, he would bring Josephine here as his wife. This house would become her home. He would share his life, his dreams, his future with her. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Diego came out to join him. "Cannot sleep either. Too much on my mind." "That is normal. I did not sleep at all the night before I married Rosa." Diego leaned against the porch railing. "Samuel, I have known you since you were a boy. I watched your father die of grief after losing your mother, and I have watched you close yourself off from the world because you were afraid of ending up like him. But love is not something to fear. It is a gift. The fact that your parents loved each other so deeply they could not live without one another, that is not a tragedy. It is beautiful, but the pain when it ends. Life is pain, my friend. You cannot avoid suffering by avoiding love. You just end up lonely and empty. Better to love deeply and risk heartbreak than never to love at all." Samuel knew Diego was right. He had spent years protecting himself, keeping people at a distance. But Josephine had broken through those defenses without even trying. She saw him, understood him, and loved him anyway. That was worth any risk. "Thank you, Diego, for everything. You have been more than an employee. You are family. And you are like a son to me. I am honored to stand up with you tomorrow." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the October air crisp but not cold. Samuel dressed in his best suit, a new one he had ordered special from the tailor in Socorro. His hands shook slightly as he fixed his tie, and he had to redo it 3 times before getting it right. The church was full when he arrived. It seemed like half of Socorro had turned out for the wedding. Samuel took his place at the front with Reverend Willis, Diego beside him as his best man. His heart pounded as the organ began to play. Then Josephine appeared at the back of the church on Aunt Margaret's arm, and everything else faded away. She was breathtaking. The ivory dress fit her perfectly, highlighting her slim waist and graceful carriage. Her auburn hair was pinned up with small white flowers woven through it. She carried a simple bouquet of wildflowers. But it was her smile that captured Samuel's attention, radiant and full of joy. Her eyes locked on his as she walked down the aisle. When she reached him, Aunt Margaret placed Josephine's hand in Samuel's. Her fingers were warm and steady, and he held them like a lifeline. Reverend Willis began the ceremony, his voice carrying through the church as he spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage. Samuel barely heard the words. He was too focused on Josephine, on the reality that in a few moments she would be his wife. "Do you, Samuel O'Reilly, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Samuel said, his voice strong and clear. "And do you, Josephine Sanders, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Josephine said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Samuel leaned down and kissed Josephine, sealing their vows before God and the community. The church erupted in applause, and when they broke apart, both of them were smiling so wide it almost hurt. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, husband and wife. Outside the church, people threw rice and shouted congratulations. Samuel helped Josephine into the wagon he had decorated with ribbons and wildflowers, and they rode together toward the ranch, toward their new life together. The reception at the ranch was lively and joyful. Rosa and several other women from town had prepared a feast. There was dancing in the yard as the sun set, music provided by a fiddler and a guitarist from Socorro. Samuel, who never danced, found himself swept onto the makeshift dance floor by his new wife, her laughter making him forget his self-consciousness. As the evening wore on and guests began to drift away, Samuel and Josephine stood together watching the last of the sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. "This is where it all started," Josephine said softly. "Right here, watching this sunset. I came to your ridge to capture the light, and I found so much more." "What did you find?" Samuel asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "Home, love, you." She turned to face him. "I know I said it before, but I want to say it again now that we are married. I love you, Samuel. And I promise to be a good wife to you, to support your dreams, to make this ranch house a real home." "You already have," Samuel said. "From the moment you painted it, you saw what it could be, and now you are here to help make that vision real." They kissed as the stars began to emerge overhead. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had opened their hearts despite their fears, who had chosen love over safety. The first months of marriage were an adjustment for both of them. Josephine had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and long days, the endless cycle of work that kept the operation running. Samuel had to get used to having another person in his space, sharing his home, his bed, his life. But the adjustments were small compared to the joy of being together. Samuel loved waking up with Josephine beside him, her warmth chasing away the chill of the cool desert mornings. He loved watching her paint on the porch in the afternoons, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating. He loved coming in from a hard day of work to find supper waiting and Josephine ready to hear about everything that had happened. Josephine flourished at the ranch. She set up a proper studio in one of the unused outbuildings, and her painting thrived with the constant inspiration around her. She painted the changing seasons, the horses and cattle, the landscape in all its moods. Several more people from Socorro commissioned work from her, and her reputation as an artist began to spread beyond the immediate area. "I received a letter today," she told Samuel one evening in late December as they sat by the fire. Outside, the first real winter storm of the season was blowing in. "From an art dealer in Santa Fe. He saw one of my paintings at the Mercantile and wants to discuss representing my work." "That is wonderful," Samuel said, genuinely pleased for her. "It would mean taking a trip to Santa Fe to meet with him. Would you come with me?" "Of course. We can go after the spring calving is done, make a proper trip of it." Josephine smiled and snuggled closer to him on the settee. "I love my life here. I know I have only been your wife for a few months, but I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else." "I feel the same way. You have made this house a home, Josephine. You have made my whole life richer." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle in the hearth. Samuel thought about his parents, about their deep love for each other, and he understood it now in a way he never had before. He understood why his father had not wanted to go on living after his mother died. Because the thought of losing Josephine, of facing life without her, was unbearable. But he also understood something Diego had said. Love was worth the risk. Every moment with Josephine was precious, and he would not trade it for the safety of solitude and distance. Winter passed into spring, and with spring came new life on the ranch. The cattle calved, the horses foaled, and the land burst into bloom. Josephine painted it all, capturing the vitality and energy of the season. She had never been happier, and it showed in her work. In early May, Samuel and Josephine made the trip to Santa Fe to meet with the art dealer. The city was bustling and sophisticated compared to Socorro, but Samuel found it overwhelming. He was relieved when their business was concluded and they could head home. The meeting with the dealer, a shrewd but fair man named Arthur Milton, had gone well. He wanted to represent Josephine's work throughout the territory and possibly beyond. He thought her paintings of the West, with their unique blend of technical skill and emotional depth, would appeal to collectors back east who were hungry for authentic images of frontier life. "This could be the beginning of a real career," Josephine said excitedly as they rode home. "Mr. Milton thinks I could become quite successful." "You deserve success," Samuel said. "Your talent should be recognized, but I do not want success to take me away from you or the ranch. This is my home now, my real life. The painting is important, but you are more important." Samuel reached over and took her hand. "We will make it work. Whatever happens, we will face it together." Summer arrived with its oppressive heat. The work on the ranch was endless during these months, from sunup to well past sundown. But even exhausted and covered in dust, Samuel felt content. He had Josephine waiting for him at the end of each day, her smile and her love giving him energy even when his body was worn out. In late July, Josephine began feeling unwell. At first they thought it was just the heat or something she ate. But when the symptoms persisted for over a week, Rosa took Josephine aside for a private conversation. That evening, Josephine found Samuel in the barn where he was checking on a mare with a sore hoof. She looked different, Samuel thought, nervous but also excited. "Samuel, I need to tell you something." He set down the mare's hoof and straightened, giving Josephine his full attention. "What is it?" "Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine, actually." She took a deep breath. "Rosa thinks, and I agree with her, that I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Samuel could not process the words. A baby. He was going to be a father. They were going to be parents. "Are you sure?" he finally managed to ask. "As sure as we can be without seeing a doctor. All the signs are there. I think the baby will come in February, around our 6-month anniversary." Samuel crossed the space between them in 2 strides and pulled Josephine into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Josephine asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Happy." "Josephine, I am overjoyed, terrified but overjoyed." She pulled back to look at him. "Terrified? Why?" "Because I want to be a good father, because I want to keep you and the baby safe, because everything is about to change." "Change is good," Josephine said. "Change is how we grow." "And you will be a wonderful father, Samuel. I have no doubt about that." They went to see the doctor in Socorro the following week, and he confirmed what Rosa and Josephine had suspected. The baby was due in late February or early March. The doctor gave them instructions on what to expect and how to keep Josephine healthy during the pregnancy. As the months passed and Josephine's belly grew, Samuel found himself overwhelmed with protective instincts. He wanted her to rest more, to avoid any heavy work, to take care of herself. Josephine tolerated his fussing with good humor, though she insisted she was perfectly capable of continuing most of her normal activities. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him when he suggested she should not climb the stairs to her studio. "I am pregnant, not fragile." But she did slow down as the pregnancy progressed. Her painting became less frequent as she tired more easily. Samuel made sure she had everything she needed, from extra pillows for sleeping to special foods when her cravings struck. Diego and Rosa were delighted by the news of the coming baby. Rosa began knitting blankets and tiny clothes, and Diego helped Samuel convert the spare bedroom into a nursery. They painted the walls a soft yellow and built a cradle from wood Samuel had been saving for something special. As winter closed in and Josephine's due date approached, Samuel found himself awake at night, staring at the ceiling and worrying. What if something went wrong? Childbirth was dangerous, especially out here far from sophisticated medical care. Women died. Babies died. The thought of losing Josephine, of raising a child alone the way his father had raised him after his mother's death, terrified him. But he kept these fears to himself, not wanting to worry Josephine. She seemed calm and confident, trusting her body to do what it was designed to do. In late February, on a cold night with wind howling around the house, Josephine woke Samuel with a hand on his shoulder. "It is time," she said. "The baby is coming." Samuel jumped out of bed, his heart racing. He pulled on his clothes and boots, then helped Josephine into her warmest robe. "I will get Rosa," he said, "and send Diego for the doctor." "Samuel," Josephine said, catching his hand, "it will be all right. Women do this every day." He kissed her forehead. "I know, but that does not make me any less scared." The next 12 hours were the longest of Samuel's life. Rosa arrived and took charge, sending Samuel out of the bedroom more than once when his pacing and worrying became disruptive. Diego went for the doctor, who arrived around mid-morning. Samuel waited in the main room with Diego, unable to sit still, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. "She is strong," Diego said, his hand on Samuel's shoulder. "She will be fine." But Samuel could not shake his fear. He thought about his mother, who had died from complications from her fall when she was not much older than Josephine was now. He thought about all the women he had known who had died in childbirth, their graves in the Socorro cemetery a stark reminder of the dangers. Then, just after noon, he heard a new sound. The thin, angry wail of a baby crying. His heart stopped, then started again, pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Rosa emerged from the bedroom, her face beaming. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy baby boy, and Josephine is tired but doing well." Relief made Samuel's knees weak. "They are both all right." "Both fine. Come meet your son." Samuel entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Josephine lay propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but glowing. In her arms, wrapped in one of Rosa's knitted blankets, was the smallest person Samuel had ever seen. "Come meet your son," Josephine said softly. Samuel approached the bed and looked down at the baby. He had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. His tiny hands were clenched into fists and his eyes were squeezed shut. He was perfect. "You want to hold him?" Josephine asked. "I have never held a baby before." "Then it is time you learned." Josephine showed him how to support the baby's head, and then Samuel was holding his son, this tiny person he had helped create. The baby stopped crying and opened his eyes, and Samuel found himself looking into dark eyes that seemed to see right into his soul. "Hello," Samuel whispered. "I am your father." "What should we name him?" Josephine asked. "I was thinking we could name him after your father, Thomas." "Thomas Samuel O'Reilly," Samuel said, testing how the name sounded. "I like it. Tom for short." "Hello, Tom," Josephine said softly. "Welcome to the world." The weeks after Tom's birth were exhausting but joyful. Samuel learned how to change diapers, how to walk a fussy baby around the room at 3 in the morning, how to feel his heart swell with love every time Tom made eye contact or grabbed his finger with surprising strength. Josephine recovered well from the birth and threw herself into motherhood with the same dedication she brought to everything else. As winter turned to spring, the ranch came alive again. Samuel worked alongside Diego during the day while Josephine cared for Tom. In the evenings, the three of them would sit together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors while Tom nursed or slept in his mother's arms. "I wish I could paint this," Josephine said one evening. "The feeling of this moment, complete contentment." "Maybe you can," Samuel said, "when Tom is older and less demanding." "Maybe, but I am not in a hurry. This time with him is precious. The painting can wait." As Tom grew, his personality began to emerge. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. Samuel loved watching him change and develop, loved being there for every milestone. First smile, first laugh, first time sleeping through the night. Each one felt like a miracle. The art dealer in Santa Fe wrote several times asking for new work, but Josephine politely declined. Her focus was on her family now, and the painting had taken a back seat. Samuel worried sometimes that she might regret giving up her career, but when he asked her about it, she was adamant. "My painting will always be there," she said. "But Tom is only a baby once. I do not want to miss a single moment of watching him grow." When Tom was 6 months old, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was less shocking but equally joyful. They would have another child, another person to love and raise and guide through life. "I hope it is a girl this time," Josephine said. "I would love to have a daughter." Their daughter arrived the following spring, a tiny, perfect baby girl with auburn hair like her mother's and Samuel's dark eyes. They named her Alina Rose O'Reilly, called her Ellie from the start. With 2 small children, life on the ranch became even busier. Samuel hired another hand to help Diego with the work, a young man from town named Peter who was eager to learn ranching. The extra help allowed Samuel more time with his family, which he cherished. Josephine returned to painting when Ellie was about a year old, and Tom was old enough to entertain himself for stretches of time. She set up her easel on the porch where she could watch the children play while she worked. Her style had evolved, becoming somehow richer and more nuanced. She painted her children, the ranch life around her, the landscape she loved. The art dealer was thrilled when she sent him new work. Her paintings sold quickly, and her reputation grew. But Josephine never let success change her. She remained devoted to Samuel and the children, to the ranch, and the life they had built together. Years passed in a pleasant blur of hard work and family life. Tom grew into a sturdy, serious boy who loved horses and wanted to be just like his father. Ellie was spirited and creative, showing her mother's artistic talent from an early age. Samuel and Josephine added another child, a second son they named James, and later another daughter, Margaret, named after Josephine's aunt who had passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73. The ranch prospered under Samuel's careful management. He expanded the horse breeding operation and became known throughout the territory for producing quality stock. Diego eventually retired from the heavy ranch work, but remained on the property in a small house Samuel built for him and Rosa, advising and helping where he could. Samuel watched his children grow with pride and love. Tom, serious and responsible, took to ranching naturally and became Samuel's right hand as he got older. Ellie, artistic and passionate, developed into a talented painter under her mother's tutelage. James, the most outgoing of the children, charmed everyone he met and showed a gift for business. Margaret, the baby, had her mother's kind heart and her father's quiet strength. Through it all, Samuel and Josephine's love for each other deepened and matured. They faced challenges together, celebrated triumphs together, and built a life that was richer than either of them had imagined possible. One evening, when Samuel was 52 and Josephine was 46, they stood together on the same ridge where Josephine had first painted his sunset 20 years earlier. Their children were grown now. Tom was married and working the ranch alongside Samuel. Ellie had moved to Santa Fe to pursue her art career seriously, though she visited often. James was studying business in Albuquerque, planning to return and help manage the growing ranch operations. Margaret, at 16, was the only one still living at home, and she would soon be heading off to a women's college back east. "You remember the first time I saw you?" Josephine asked, her hand in Samuel's. Her hair was threaded with gray now, and fine lines marked her face, but to Samuel she was as beautiful as she had been at 26. "How could I forget? I thought you were trespassing. I was prepared to run you off my land. Thank goodness you did not. Thank goodness you were kind instead of angry. I took one look at you and something in my chest just opened up. I did not know it at the time, but I was already falling in love with you." Josephine turned to face him, her hazel eyes still bright and clear. "I painted a picture that day of a home, of belonging, without realizing I was painting my future, our future. It all started here," Samuel said, "with you painting my sunset. It did, and what a life we have built from that beginning." They stood together watching the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, the same colors Josephine had captured on canvas 2 decades before. The ranch house below them glowed in the golden light, smoke rising from the chimney, the windows bright with lamplight. It looked exactly like Josephine's first painting of it, a home filled with warmth and love and belonging. "I need to tell you something," Josephine said suddenly, her voice serious. Samuel's heart clenched. "What is it? Are you ill?" "No, nothing like that," she smiled. "I am just feeling nostalgic, I suppose, looking back on our life together, and I wanted to tell you that you have made me happier than I ever dreamed possible. That first evening when I told you I felt lonely, that I was looking for something, I found it with you, home, love, purpose. Everything I needed. Relief washed over Samuel. You have given me the same gifts. Before you, I was alive but not really living, just going through the motions. You taught me how to open my heart, how to love, how to be fully present in my own life. We have been blessed, Josephine said. We have. 4 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, health and happiness and love, more than I ever thought to ask for. They walked back to the house hand in hand as darkness fell. Inside, Margaret was preparing supper, and the house smelled of fresh bread and roasting meat. Rosa and Diego came over to join them for the meal, as they often did, and the conversation was lively and full of laughter. After supper, Samuel and Josephine sat together on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. The night was cool but pleasant, and stars filled the sky from horizon to horizon. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked. "Giving up your chance at a bigger art career to raise our children?" "Not for a single moment," Josephine said firmly. "I made the right choice. I have still painted, still created art that I am proud of. But nothing I could have accomplished as an artist would have been as important or fulfilling as the family we built together. The children are all grown now, or nearly so. You could focus more on your painting if you wanted to." "Maybe I will. But I am also content just being here with you, living this life we made. That is enough for me." Samuel pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, horses nickering in the corrals, cattle lowing in the distance. The wind rustling through the cottonwoods by the creek. The sounds of home. As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Josephine settled into the comfortable rhythms of later life. Tom and his wife gave them 3 grandchildren who loved visiting the ranch. Ellie found success as an artist in Santa Fe and married a fellow painter. James returned from school and helped expand the ranch's business operations, his natural charisma making him an excellent negotiator and salesman. Margaret attended college and became a teacher, eventually returning to Socorro to work at the local school. Samuel and Josephine watched their grandchildren grow with the same love and pride they had felt for their own children. They took joy in spoiling the little ones, in telling stories about the old days, in passing on family traditions. Diego passed away peacefully at the age of 87, and Samuel grieved the loss of the man who had been like a father to him. They buried Diego on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Samuel visited the grave often, talking to his old friend about the ranch and the family and the life they had built together. Rosa lived for 2 more years before joining her husband, and Josephine grieved the loss of the woman who had become her closest friend. But they took comfort in the fact that Diego and Rosa had lived long, full lives surrounded by people who loved them. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Josephine renewed their vows in the Socorro church with all their children and grandchildren in attendance. Samuel looked at Josephine as she spoke her vows again, her voice still strong and clear, her eyes still bright with love, and he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 30 years. 3 decades of love and partnership, of raising children and building a life together, of facing challenges and celebrating triumphs side by side. "I love you more today than I did the day we married," he said when it was his turn to speak. "And I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Every day with you is a gift." The reception was held at the ranch, and Samuel looked around at the gathering with deep satisfaction. His children, successful and happy. His grandchildren, healthy and loved. His land, still productive and beautiful. And Josephine, his wife and partner and best friend, standing beside him as she had for 30 years. As the evening wound down and the guests began to depart, Josephine took Samuel's hand and led him to the ridge where they had first met. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, just as it had been doing all those years ago. "You remember what I revealed to you that first evening?" Josephine asked. "What left you breathless?" Samuel thought back. "You showed me the painting. You showed me how you saw my ranch, not just as a piece of property but as a home, a place where someone could belong." "That is what I saw in the painting," Josephine agreed. "But what I revealed, without even realizing it at the time, was my heart. I was lonely and looking for home, and when I painted your ranch, I was painting my deepest longing. For belonging, for love, for a place and a person where I could be fully myself." "And I was the same," Samuel said. "I did not know I was lonely until I met you. I thought I was content with my quiet life, but you showed me what I was missing." "We found each other," Josephine said simply. "Two lonely souls who were meant to be together." They stood together watching the sunset, older now but no less in love than they had been at the beginning. The ranch house below them glowed with warm light, a true home filled with love and family and belonging, just as Josephine had painted it all those years ago. "What a life we have built," Samuel said. "What a life we are still building," Josephine corrected. "We have years ahead of us yet." And they did. They had many more years together, years filled with the quiet joys of long marriage, watching more grandchildren arrive, seeing their children succeed in their chosen paths, working together on the ranch, painting together, as Samuel had taken up watercolors in his later years, and Josephine patiently taught him. When Samuel was 68 and Josephine was 62, they took a trip back to Boston so Josephine could see the city of her birth one last time. They visited her parents' graves and the house where she had grown up. But Josephine was clear that it was just a visit. New Mexico was her home now, had been her home since the day she had first seen the ranch bathed in sunset light. They returned to Socorro and the ranch, to their children and grandchildren, and the life they had built together. Samuel's hair was white now, and his hands bore the scars and calluses of a lifetime of hard work. Josephine's once auburn hair had faded to silver, and arthritis sometimes made it difficult for her to paint for long periods. But their love remained strong, a foundation that had weathered decades and only grown more solid with time. One evening in late autumn, when the air was crisp and leaves from the cottonwoods floated golden on the breeze, Samuel and Josephine walked out to the ridge one more time. They moved more slowly now, Samuel with a cane and Josephine leaning on his arm, but they made it to the spot where they had first met 41 years before. 41 years, Josephine marveled. "Where did the time go?" "Into building a life," Samuel said. "Into raising our children and loving each other. We have been blessed beyond measure. We have." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar colors. The ranch below them was thriving, now run mostly by Tom with help from James. Samuel had stepped back from the day-to-day operations, content to advise when asked and enjoy his later years with Josephine. "If I could go back and talk to that 26-year-old woman who trespassed on your land to paint a sunset," Josephine said, "I would tell her not to worry. I would tell her that she is about to meet the love of her life, that she is going to build a beautiful family and have a wonderful life. I would tell her that every dream she has is going to come true. And if I could talk to that 32-year-old rancher who was so set in his quiet ways," Samuel said, "I would tell him to stop being afraid, to open his heart and let this woman in, because she is going to change his life in the best possible way." "We would not believe ourselves," Josephine said with a laugh. "We would think we were exaggerating, probably." They turned to head back to the house, walking slowly in the fading light. Their children were coming for supper, and the house would soon be full of noise and laughter and love. As they walked, Samuel thought about that first evening, about the woman with the easel who had trespassed on his land and captured his heart. He thought about the painting she had made, showing his ranch as a home full of warmth and belonging. That painting still hung above the fireplace in the main room, a reminder of where their story began. Josephine had painted a vision that evening, a dream of what could be. And then, together, they had spent the next 4 decades making that dream a reality. That night, with their children and grandchildren gathered around the long table in the ranch house kitchen, Samuel looked at the faces of the people he loved most in the world. Tom and his wife and their children. Ellie and her husband, visiting from Santa Fe. James and his fiancée, preparing for a wedding in the spring. Margaret and her husband, recently married. And at the center of it all, Josephine, her face glowing with happiness and love as she looked around at the family they had created together. After supper, when the children had taken the grandchildren home and Samuel and Josephine were alone again, they sat together by the fire. Josephine rested her head on Samuel's shoulder, and he held her close. "I love you," he said, as he had said countless times over the years. "I love you too," she replied, as she always did. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers, content in each other's presence. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and stars wheeled overhead, the same wind and the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love story all those years ago. Samuel thought about what the townspeople used to call him, the quiet rancher. He supposed he was still quiet, still more comfortable with silence than with speech. But his silence was different now. Not the silence of isolation and loneliness, but the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other so well that words were not always necessary. Josephine had seen him, truly seen him, from that very first evening. She had looked past the quiet exterior to the man underneath, the man who longed for connection and belonging even if he was afraid to admit it. And in seeing him, in loving him, she had given him permission to be fully himself. In return, Samuel had given Josephine a home and a family, a place where she belonged, where her art and her spirit could flourish. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of love that would continue through their children and grandchildren. As the fire died down and the night grew late, Samuel and Josephine made their way to bed. They moved through the familiar routine of preparing for sleep, comfortable with each other after decades of marriage. When they finally lay down together, Josephine curled against Samuel's side as she had done for 41 years. "Thank you," she whispered in the darkness. "For what?" "For being kind to a trespasser all those years ago, for not running me off your land, for taking a chance on love even though it scared you, for giving me the best life I could have imagined." "I should be thanking you," Samuel said. "You changed everything. You made my house a home, you gave me a family, you taught me how to love. I was just existing before you. You made me truly alive." "We saved each other," Josephine said. "Two lonely souls who found each other at exactly the right moment." Samuel kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Good night, my love. Good night." They drifted off to sleep together. Two people who had loved each other through youth and middle age and into their later years, who had built a life together one day at a time, who had proved that love was not just a feeling but a choice made over and over again across the years. The quiet rancher and the woman who had painted his sunset. Two people who had found home in each other, whose love story would be passed down through generations. A reminder that sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single step, a moment of courage, a willingness to be seen. And as they slept, the ranch house settled around them with familiar creaks and sighs, sheltering the love that had blossomed within its walls, a love that had transformed a simple piece of property into a true home. a sanctuary where hearts could be vulnerable and spirits could soar, where family gathered and laughter rang out and love endured. The sunset that had brought them together would rise again tomorrow, painting the sky with color and possibility, a daily reminder that beauty and love and home were not just things to be found, but things to be created, nurtured, and cherished across a lifetime.